Hello! Some months back, I posted a video revealing that there is, in fact, a hidden fourth ending in Cave Story allowing you to save King, Toroko, and the Colons, as well as go home with the Sakamotos along with Curly Brace. I showed about 9 minutes of footage of the path for getting this ending while explaining how to do so, in addition to explaining and showing footage of glitches that occur while doing this ending in various ports. To my great surprise, however, there was an uproar of people complaining that this didn't work for them, and that the tile in the sand zone was still solid even if they didn't walk up to Curly Brace. And so my video became looked upon as a hoax, causing some people to not even try this just by looking at the comments. I was utterly baffled by this. At first, it was my belief that there were just a few trolls trying to get people not to try this, but the population grew of people saying it didn't work. Therefore, there were obviously some extra requirements for getting the fourth ending that other people were missing that I kept subconsciously getting. First off, you will clearly be able to see that the fourth ending is not fake, because there was a handful of YouTubers saying they got it to work, and were equally baffled at all these April Fool's accusations. They as well must have subconsciously been getting these extra requirements. Now before I say what these extra requirements are, let me get something straight on what versions of Cave Story you can get this secret fourth ending in. You cannot get the fourth ending in Cave Story 3D. You can get the fourth ending in the original Cave Story. You can get the fourth ending in Cave Story WiiWare. You can get the fourth ending in Cave Story DSiWare. You can get the fourth ending in Cave Story Plus. And you can get this ending for the eShop version for the 3DS. That is, if you're playing as Quote. You cannot, and I repeat not, get this ending in Curly Brace mode. The very first complaints about this ending not working were regarding the inability to get this ending in Curly Brace mode. Indelacio Let's Play even did an LP to try and get the fourth ending in response to my video. The problem was that he did it in Curly Brace mode, which meant he couldn't do it.
Looks like the ending was bullshit.
But even people who did this in versions where this worked and not in Curly Brace mode were still having trouble, due to not getting these extra requirements. So, what are these extra requirements not mentioned in my first video? What you have to do is get from the part where Toroko is kidnapped to the sand zone in less than 17 minutes. This makes sense, as getting to King and Toroko in time would require you to arrive pretty swiftly. It wouldn't really make much sense if you just stood around for hours waiting, but were somehow still quick enough to save them. In addition, you must say no to fighting Balrog, no to Sue when she asks you if you saved her, and no when Balrog asks you if you knew the Mimiga they kidnapped in the Mimiga village was not Sue. All of these changes in dialogue are shorter, giving you more time, and helping you get to Toroko sooner. While it may be difficult for some players to reach the sand zone in under 17 minutes, you will be happy to know that this timer pauses during cutscenes and message boxes, so it only counts up during solid gameplay. If you would like an easy and effective way of timing yourself, then you can quickly modify a bit of the game's code to do this for you. In order to do this, you'll either need an editor or a TSC script editor. If you want to altogether download an editor, then I recommend Cave Editor. There is also Sue's Workshop, but it has less features and is exceedingly efficient at wrecking your copy of Cave Story if you aren't careful to commit your changes and properly exit out. There's also another editor, Booster's Lab, which will, and to many people already has, surpassed Cave Editor in both stability and features, but I don't use it yet, as it is still in beta stage. If you are not familiar with Cave Story modding, then I recommend downloading Cave Editor, as that's what I'm about to use here, and it will thus be easier to follow what I'm doing. A link is provided in the description to download Cave Editor. If all you plan on doing, however, is modifying this one bit of code, then I recommend you just download CE Script Editor, as it is much simpler and can accomplish this task. A link for this program is in the description as well. Before you do anything, I must mention something that you only have an excuse not to know if you do not have any prior Cave Story modding experience. Do not modify the copy of Cave Story you use for straight-up Cave Story playing. Instead, copy your Cave Story and modify that new copy. When it comes to Cave Story modding, there are a bazillion different things that could go wrong, so if something happens, you don't want it to happen to your original copy of Cave Story. With that out of the way, open up the directory of the Cave Story installation that you have decided to modify. Now go to map 014. When you're at that room, click Map and from the drop-down menu, select Edit Script. If you decided to play it simple and just download CE Script Editor, then open it up, browse to your Cave Story directory, then to Data, Stage, and open up bar.tsc. Scroll down to event 1001. It doesn't matter where in this event you put it, but for this example, we'll put it right before the end command. Just before it, type > EQ plus 0256. Now save and exit, and then you're done. Changing this bit of code will cause the timer to start as soon as you say no to fighting Balrog. You will then be able to play through the game knowing how much time you have to reach the sand zone and if you're on track, or if you'll be too late. It is important to note, however, that if you exit out of the game, this timer will reset. Not the timer that decides whether or not you're able to get the fourth ending, that is saved in your save file if you save your game, but the timer shown on screen. So if you exit out of the game before getting to the sand zone, then the on-screen timer's reading when you reload the game will be inaccurate. Not that this will necessarily ruin your run, but do be cautioned. In addition, if you're playing Cave Story Plus, then the requirement is changed from 17 to 14 minutes, due to it being easier to get to the sand zone sooner since all of Nicalis' ports run the game at 60 frames per second as opposed to the original's 50. In all of Nicalis' ports prior to Cave Story Plus, wherein you can get a slightly messy fourth ending, you can not only take advantage of the 60 frames per second frame rate, but you have 17 minutes to work with since this was fourth ending exclusive code programmed into the original Cave Story that was not discovered and modified until the development of Cave Story Plus. The only downsides to doing this in older ports is that they will, of course, be glitched, and also that you won't be able to modify the script and time yourself, so you won't be able to know for sure if you've gotten to the sand zone soon enough. If all of this seems a bit overwhelming with the complications of this timer, modifying the game to make it start, or even getting to the sand zone in under 17 minutes, then to save you all the trouble, you may download a copy of Cave Story with these extra requirements removed, and the only requirements for getting the fourth ending being those shown in my previous video. A link to the version of this game with the extra requirements removed can be found in the description. Of course, this is only for the PC version, I'm afraid. So, good luck to all of you, and I hope you can now get the fourth ending. Now, if some of you are still skeptical, then here's even more evidence that the fourth ending is real. I will show you how to open up Cave Story and actually see the code that executes when you are going for the fourth ending. To do this, you'll need an editor. Just a TSC editor won't completely cut it. Also, the further into this I get, the more advanced concepts of Cave Story modding this will involve, so hang on to your seat. Open up the game with an editor and go to map number 058, the hideout. You'll notice that there are some blank entities in that room that do not serve any purpose and don't even have an event number assigned. These are entities that are assigned event numbers, a flag ID, and entity flags and changed to certain NPC types when the fourth ending takes place. By looking around at some existing maps, you may notice that this is also the case, most likely in the top left corner. More on that later. Now open up the room's script. Scroll to event number 201 and notice the words spoken by Momorin. What I need right now is a booster. Now, who would have one of those? Recall that when going for the fourth ending, and when going for the fourth ending only, you meet Momorin with no booster and she then asks for one. Living proof right there that the fourth ending is real. For many years, people thought this was a stray bit of code that can never execute, but they are wrong. It does, if you're going for the fourth ending. But looking at the room script, you will not see the cutscene where King, Jack, Sue, or Toroko get involved. In fact, you will not see any other code that executes when you're going for the fourth ending. That is because the rest of it resides elsewhere. Now some of you might be asking, if editors like these are available to people on the internet to look through the code, and there are people who claimed to have seen the game in and out, How did this fourth ending remain a secret for so long? And how has even a supposedly professional company such as Nicalis managed to overlook it for 3 years whilst having access to modify and publish the game? What happened was that in making the fourth ending so secretive, Pixel hid the code that executes when you go for the fourth ending inside of the exe. To see this code, you'll need a program called OllyDebug. You can either download it from a link in the description, or you can go to the OllyDebug website yourself. Now for those of you who know about cave story modding, and even know how to assembly hack, you'll know that there is no mention of any offsets for instructions for the fourth ending in the assembly compendium. This is because the last update was in March 2011, before Nicalis announced Cave Story Plus and notified players that there was a fourth ending, and thus motivated them to finally find this ending. Since then, the assembly compendium has not been updated. But even then, hackers have thoroughly documented the exe and not seen any code for the fourth ending in OllyDebug prior to Nicalis notifying players that there are 4 endings. That's another part of what makes the fourth ending so cryptic even from a technical point of view. In order to see this hidden code, we're going to need to download and install a plugin for OllyDebug. Go back to the Downloads page for OllyDebug and click the Sample Plugins link. Now the plugin you're going to want to install is the Show Hidden Code plugin. I'm not going to guide you through installing it, as there are already existing tutorials on how to install plugins in OllyDebug. Go ahead and pause this video, then continue watching once you have installed this plugin, as this is vital to seeing this hidden code. Open up Cave Story in OllyDebug. Now press Ctrl G and go to address 0048B8FF. You will notice that from there down to the end of the exe at address 0048BFFF, all of the instructions show up as DBOO and the hex dump as zeros. For a long time, it was common belief that this was free space left over from segment alignment by the compiler. However, this is actually where we'll find the hidden code that executes when we get the fourth ending. Modders who used this empty space for their own things prior to the discovery of the fourth ending never suffered any consequences, as the hidden code does not hold anything that will ruin the other 3 endings if tampered with. In fact, most of this is stuff that could be added without assembly. TSC scripts, extra entities, etc. But Pixel chose to hide them in the exe, presumably to make this ending hard to find even for hackers. Now that you've installed the Show Hidden Code plugin, click on the Plugins Options menu and select Show Hidden Code. Now wait as the exe reloads. Once the exe has reloaded, press Ctrl G once again and go to address 0048B8FF and look! There's a bunch of code there that we didn't see before. This is the hidden code that executes when we get the fourth ending. You will notice that from address 0048B8FF to 0048B963, the instructions are nothing but NOPs. This is because those addresses are reserved memory locations that store the event numbers of entities that do not have them stored in the map file. When fourth ending exclusive cutscenes execute which involve entities that are not present in any of the other paths, an event number is assigned to a completely blank entity. When this happens, the event number in hexadecimal is stored in the address whose decimal number minus 48B8FE in hexadecimal is equal to the entity number. If you don't understand, then hopefully this will be clear in a minute. I will not go into detail about how flag IDs and entity flags are set for fourth ending exclusive entities, as this is quite a lot of information to take in as it is. So let's take a look at this code. The first bit here executes in the hideout. That's room number 058. The first line of code we see here is move word ptrds 48b902, 172. For those of you not too familiar with ASM, just ignore the word ptrds. It isn't real important. Essentially, this stores the number 172 in hexadecimal and 370 in decimal into the memory location at address 0048b902, 4 addresses down from 0048b8fe. The fact that this is 4 addresses down corresponds to the fact that this event number will be assigned to entity number 3. 3 instead of 4 because the lowest entity number there can be in a room is 0, which would correspond to the first address down if we were assigning it an event number within the exe. Now the next line. move 48B908, 186. Now it stores event number 390 into entity 9. The next line, move 48B909, 19A, stores event number 410 into entity 10. And the next, move 48B900, 1AE, stores event number 430 into entity 1. This is a lot to take in, so I won't go into tremendous detail about how the flag IDs and entity flags are set, but just know that the next 4 lines are pushing the entities that we just initialized onto the stack, then 1 DCE, 7630 in decimal, the number of the flag ID that is to be set, and then pushes 4 onto the stack, which will help the function know how far down the stack to go. Since it pushed the memory locations of 4 different event numbers onto the stack, it pushed 4 onto the stack so that it will know to assign the flag ID to 4 different entities that have been pushed onto the stack. Then call 0048BFDF calls a function which resides at address 0048BFDF. I'm not going to show this function as it is more complicated than the event numbers, but the numbers pushed onto the stack are used to indicate what flag IDs are to be assigned to which entities and how many. When it returns to this position, the function has already removed those numbers from the stack, so those numbers pushed onto it will not mess anything up. The next 5 lines of code work similarly, except that they push entities 370 and 410 onto the stack, and assign entity flags 2800 to them. The next 5 work even more similarly, except that it assigns entity flags 3800 to entities 390 and 430. This entity flag configuration will cause all 4 of these entities to run their events when you walk up to them and press down, as well as make them appear on the map every subsequent time the map is loaded after flag 7630 has been set. And for the last 2, this will cause them to by default face right, as opposed to the other 2 which will face left unless acted upon by a TSC command. The entire rest of this section of code consists of a TSC script that, as it turns out, is the cutscene when King, Jack, Toroko, and then Sue come into the hideout. I'm not going to spend the necessary amount of time in this video to wade through this whole thing and explain all these assembly instructions and how they relate to TSC commands, but just note that the JMP of each means that it's calling a specific TSC command, and the numbers pushed onto the stack before the jump are the parameters. Only the parameters themselves are necessary to be pushed, as the TSC parser knows the number of parameters that each TSC command is meant to use. If you translate all that assembly code into TSC, you'll get this. The full TSC script for this event is provided in the description. The first command, the key command, continues to ensure that the player stays put. Then the close command closes the message box that was open before this event began. The next 4 MNP commands move the 4 initialized NPCs to position 9-4 on the map, right over the door. Next, the sound 0011 makes the door opening sound play, and immediately afterwards the CNP 100 with zeros as the next 2 parameters animates the door to open. Immediately after that, CNP 0370 changes NPC 370 to type 61, King. The script waits 20 ticks with a wait 0020. Next, he does animation number 8, which is walking forward and doing so left. This continues for 15 ticks until NPC 390 is changed into Jack. The script waits another 20 ticks, and then Jack begins walking forward as well. 10 ticks later, King reaches the edge and changes his direction. After another 5 ticks pass, NPC 410 becomes Toroko. After another 35 ticks pass, Jack stops and changes his direction as he descends. After 15 more ticks have passed, Toroko jumps in surprise as Sue comes up behind her, and entity 430 becomes Sue. After another 10 ticks, the door closes and King stops walking and faces left. The script waits another 15 ticks, and then Toroko stops her current animation and then faces right at Sue. There are 20 ticks of silence, and then Sue begins walking forward. After another 20 ticks, Toroko faces left to give the illusion of her gaze following Sue. 25 ticks later, Jack moves out of Sue's way as she is about to descend, and Sue stops walking as she does so. When 10 more ticks have passed, Quote turns to face Sue, Jack gets into a normal position, and Sue begins walking forward, this time right, for another 30 ticks until Quote moves out of Sue's way. Sue continues walking for another 5 ticks, and another bump for quote initiates in midair so that his leap backwards goes far enough. There is then a 30-tick-long period of silence before the dialogue between Sue, Momorin, King, and Jack takes place. There is so much more hidden code that accounts for the extra dialogue and cutscenes, but there is no sense in going through it all in this video, as I have already shown you this. If you really want to see the rest, then you'll have to learn assembly and open the exe up yourself and read the rest of this hidden code. So there you have it. The extra requirements for the fourth ending to Cave Story stand thus: slight modifications can be made to the game to make them easier to get, and you can actually see the code that executes which pixel cleverly hid inside of the exe. I hope you all are now able to save King and Toroko and get this ending, and please comment and tell me if you guys can get it now. I'm really sorry that before I didn't mention these extra requirements in the previous video, causing this tremendous controversy over the legitimacy of this path. Hopefully, this will straighten things out, and people will no longer mistake Nicalis' 4 endings claim for referring to the Mimikamask altered normal ending. Thank you for watching.